No.
Well, you were coming in at 7. I was in the middle of that show, but that's okay. It worked out. Here, let me
Yeah.
tag. I'll tag you on the show. Let's make sure it's connected. Here we go. All right. Boom. Okay. So we get to resume our conversation on sacred sexuality and something
Yeah.
something that you opened up and we were talking about. I was just telling you about a couple of the experiences that we had. We had two within a 4 day period, and it was. I'm convinced. We're convinced that these things happen because of the frequency that we were holding with each other, which really didn't even involve conventional physical intimacy. It was more of just the frequency we were carrying together. And one of them I told you about, which I think was uh, for about 25 minutes, we morphed into different aspects of ourselves, both on planet, off universe. And, and then at the end, a man came out from behind her and kind of gestured to me and then walked through a wall. Another time, a couple of days later, the room filled up with about, I want to say there was probably 6 beings, translucent beings, humanoid.
Mhm.
And yeah, and to me, and some of the other stuff I'd mentioned to you last time, to me, it seems like that this frequency, whether it's held within ourselves or with another person, is accessible when we reach that field of frequency, that band. I don't know
Mhm.
what your experience has been. Where do you want to start?
Well, I think I'll start with the examining the root cause of relationships and where they came from. And if I repeat anything that I've said to you on the interviews before, well, there's always a new take on them anyway. So I'm just going to go to this, my favourite story, really, I have to say. And so here I go. Ah, it sat there for eons and eons and eons, and something inside of it started to move. And it noticed this movement, but it returned to its meditation, reverie, stillness, and silence for eons and eons and eons and eons. And then the second time, this thing moved quite a lot, and it thought to itself, what is this thing doing, disturbing my meditation? But it returned to its stillness, silence, and being for eons and eons and eons. And the third time, this thing moved a lot. And in a fit of rage, he pushed her out of himself, and she span off into the void, helplessly and terrified. After a while, he felt deep remorse because he realized what he had done, the injustice. So he flew down. And at this point, of course, there was no universe. There was only this sort of thick, black, dark, congealed, cloudy mass of energy. And so as he flew down in the distance, because she was almost expired, her light was very faint, but he saw this faint light and he flew down and he saw her there terrified. So he grabbed her to his chest and he flew her back to the point from which they had emerged. As you might guess, in only a short while, they fell deeply in love with each other. He find her, he found her very magnetic, and she found him very electric, and they suited each other perfectly. The thing about the original father and mother of creation is that they had no blueprint, they had no plan for relationship. So when they made love, they had not cleared their relationships first, sorry, their emotions first. And so as it went, every time she orgasmed, they gave birth to spirits. I mean, the first spirits were the ancient ones, and then there was the archangels and the angels and the seraphims and so forth. And so they were populating this realm, the spirit realm. And I'm going to jump forward now to probably my favorite part of the story. The story is a much longer one, but I'm just condensing it here. And so the two of them are standing alone in front of a beautiful portal. And between the two columns of the portal, there is this dark, mass of congealing, steamy nothingness. And he looks at her and he thinks to himself, my God, I love her so much. We've had such glorious sex and intimacy. And I just really long for her every day. And then he has a thought, and his thought is, my God, we're going out through this portal into a universe that we know nothing about. And, she had already expressed some premonition that this wasn't going to be as easy as they thought. And so he considered this for a moment, but he was already feeling very uncomfortable. So he turned around and he looked at the source from which they had emerged behind him. And he contemplated, well, we haven't even, are we going to leave the source when we don't even know what's going to happen? And in that moment, he goes, no! And the first sound that rattles out through the portal is the sound of no. And as any woman will tell you, you can't say yes until you've learned to say no. And so basically, the universe was a reflection of that need to respect the other's version of life and also their right to space. And the last little part of the story that I'll tell you, the myth, the magic and the myth, and the miracles of life that we have now, is that she created planet Earth around about 6 billion years ago, bearing in mind that the original part of the story occurred 13.8 billion years ago, when the universe exploded from singularity into relationship, space and relationship and time. So she created this Earth as a place to make love with him so that they could resolve the differences they'd had in the beginning due to their uncleared emotions. And so it was a paradise. It was like the Garden of Eden. It was, full of, it was a blue planet, but it was full of, green trees and waterfalls and the sound of music wafting through the air and the blue oceans. And so it took about, say, 3 billion years because the planet to start with was like fire and brimstone and molten rock and little eruptions everywhere. And there was no chance that life could form in those conditions. So around about 2 billion years ago, it had cooled down and the planet had become much as we see it today. And the first animals evolved, and then along with the first humans. And so she had two reasons for creating Earth. One was for him, and secondly, she created it because she wanted a safe place for her children in a new dimension, a new physical dimension. And the physical dimension was a place where she could rear the 12 children. There was 12 again. That number comes up often in my my myth. And so there were basically six spirits, male spirits, and six female spirits. And I can bring it into what happens in our families and our relationships today, but maybe I'll just see how you're going with this, Todd.
So that would sound like it was the Earth's first monad, first family, right?
Hmm. Exactly. So, um, so basically, yes, you were really correct. It was like telepathic because I was going to talk about family. And so basically, the father, um, the masculine side of creation, split into the father and the son. And the feminine side of creation, which was more related to feelings, split into the daughter and the mother. Now, if you imagine a circle with a square in it, we'll place each one of these beings on a corner of the square. So let's put the mother opposite the son and the father opposite the daughter, because even though parents love their children a lot, the father often has a kind of like a deeper feeling, an empathy with the daughter, and the mother has more empathy with the son. So now imagine that the cycle of creation is being elucidated by this, we call it a soul family. Okay. So in the beginning, each one of these four, we call them archetypes, has three essences. And the sun has he has three actually, but I'm only going to talk about one. He has the purity of truth. So basically, he's the visionary. He's bringing through the new energy, which will eventually become information and structures on Earth. So once he's brought through this vision, he passes it to the daughter, and the daughter is a very interesting character. She has the wisdom of the wound, which is her menstruation, where she remembers the original wound or the original cause when the father and mother experienced terror and rage. And also, she's kind of the mystery. The mystery is the mystery of sexuality. And so, anyway, she grounds the son's visions, his purity, in a more earthly expression of sexuality. And then the daughter passes the message to the mother, and the mother, of course, was her main essence is compassion, but she expresses it through the love for her children, and so she's the mother, the sacred mother, and then she then passes the message finally on to the father, who well he's also an amazing character because he is he is all about plans and structure and grounding the new civilization. But also, in order for this civilization to manifest, there has to be a space for it. So he's also the creator and destroyer. And the understanding is that you can't really create something without creating a space for it first. And so this is the cycle of soul family that's going on. So I'll send it back to you, Todd.
And what do you think that? And that all makes sense to me. What do you think that the the union of two people who embody to the point where they're bringing everything in and consummating it, for lack of a better word, uh, are they reenacting or reliving the original reunification? would you say? That's the
Yeah,
seed of the cycle itself?
yeah, yeah. I love your questions. They're always right on the subject at the right moment. Um, so, um, mm, let me describe an experience I had in India quite some time ago. I think it was 1996, and it was the time when I just split up with my ex-partner, the mother of my two younger children, and we were living on a property close, about an hour's drive from where I am now. And uh, she had become somewhat disillusioned for reasons I didn't fully understand with our relationship. And she kind of, uh, she would say, I don't want to be in this relationship. And I finally got irritated enough to say to her, well, look, I understand those are your feelings, but maybe it's best we took space from one another and see what happens. So it all happened very fast. My daughter was 2 years old, and she had an attraction for a man who was at the birthday party. And meanwhile, um, I had turned up to uh, the outback hills, the rainforest, and I had gone to a party, and I met a woman named Zeno, who was a sannyasin of Osho, which, of course, I know you, Todd, will know that Osho, uh, originally his followers were called the Orange People, the sannyasins. And I love Osho because for all he did have some foibles, but he also was brave enough and courageous enough to talk about sexuality in India, where it was somewhat of a faux pas for a
That's
so-called
crazy when you
spiritual.
think of the Kama Sutra and their progressive attitude or openness compared to the Western
Yeah,
world.
yeah. So he was actually talking about tantra during the 70s. He died in 1990, but he's really quite famous for his recorded speeches back in the 70s. And so again, I love to talk about this because it was such an amazing thing that happened to me. So I met this woman called Zeno, and we decided after a 3 month passionate love affair that we were going to go to India, meet in India together at Osho's ashram, which is in Pune, which is not far from Mumbai, and we were going to uh, see what happened before, but whatever was happening, we were going to meet. We made that commitment. So actually, as it happened, she went to the USA and kind of fell in love a bit with a guy and had a relationship with him. And meanwhile, me back in Australia, because I had to stay for my kids, um, I also had a quick affair or relationship. And we met, I think, in February of 1996 in Pune. And uh, it was like a 12-day retreat for 14 couples. And it took place in the black, it was a black pyramid, glass pyramid that had a basement, a square basement under the pyramid. And there was a lovely picture of Osho. And there was, so we sat round, and for the first probably 4 days, this beautiful, she was kind of a black woman, mixed race. She gave a discourse on, and she started with our present day civilization. And she said, well, our civilization is characterized by people who are rushing towards a conclusion, an outcome, an agenda. And in many ways, they're missing the beauty of where they are in the moment. And also, just prior to this event, I'm skipping back a couple of days, but um, Zeno had quite a deep love affair with this guy in America, and I'd only had just a quick kind of, you know, just a thing really, and so she was a bit in doubt, you know, like, am I ready to do this? Because my heart is sort of a bit here and there, and um, this woman called Sudha, the facilitator, said to her, "Well, actually, it's actually perfect if you're a friend who's going to be intimate, because you don't carry the baggage of a long-term relationship." So, um, so back to the pyramid. So, I'm just going to run through this fairly quickly. After the first few days, it became obvious that when the women were up one end of the room and the men were up the other, and they were being confidential with one another, that the women would the women would experience they would have memories of sexual abuse, and the men, as it turned out, because the facilitator had explained that this form of intimacy wasn't going to require an erection. The men were kind of taken aback. A man likes to sort of be proud of his presence with his woman, and
Like a
there's
rooster.
so
Cock-a-doodle doo.
that's a good one, yeah. So anyway, Uh, this is how it unfolded. Okay, so in intimacy. So actually, I loved it because when we went back to our lodgings, which are beautiful marbled houses with floors and stairways, and uh, we lived in a kind of a loft, an attic, if you like, beautiful dwelling, and um, we had a servant because the ashram provided employment to local women who would come and look after people who were doing courses like us. And also, there was a beautiful. The building had a flat roof, a little perimeter wall, and you could stand up there and kind of meditate on the streets of India below, all the kind of the confusion and the beeping and honking and the markets and all of that. So as we arrived home, for our homework, we would stand opposite each other to begin with, maybe about 3 or 4 meters apart, and uh, we would see if our body wanted to move. But the whole key to this whole experience that I'm going into now is it's about being together in a state of allowance. There's a sect in Indonesia called Ubud, and Ubud adheres to this idea of latihan, being in latihan, and so so as we were standing opposite each other, and I mean, obviously, I can't really explain because it's different couples, but basically, what I experienced was this kind of subtle swinging. It was kind of like I have this central stillness running through me, but I was actually like, well, it's like the center of the storm, and around it was this movement. And so the key to actually our connection was looking to each other's eyes constantly, and also, um, to a certain extent, synchronizing our breath, which became easier later. But we synchronize our breath. Now, of course, my love affair is with the sound, that shrill sound that I've talked about. So I'd probably stay with that while I looked into her eyes. But so the next thing is really important. We would do what I call clearing. And remember now, this is directly related to the experience of the original lovers because they had failed to clear their emotions before they made love. And so it's a very lovely process. I would just say to Zeno, this my partner, I would say, is there anything you would like to say to me that you haven't felt comfortable to say in the last week or two? And if so, I invite you to speak of it now. And so she would speak, and I would, as I promised, actually, I would only say thank you when she finished. And then she would continue. Perhaps she had more to say. So I'd say, well, I'm listening. Please continue. And uh, she would talk a bit more, and then I would say thank you. And then it would just turn around nicely. So she would be asking me the same questions. And by doing this, we were unblocking the energy that is suppressed or unknown within the lovers. And so the next part of it was we're getting close to the essence now, is we sit on the bed together naked and we would look into each other's eyes and we would do a kind of pranam with our hands like that. And I would salute the goddess in her and she would salute the god in me. And then the intimacy started. Now, the important thing about this is that there was no foreplay whatsoever. So one of the things that's we put beside the bed was the pure essence of coconut oil, and so my partner Zeno would take me in her hand, and she would put coconut oil on my penis, and then she would maybe put some in her vagina, and then we would be connected, fully connected by genitals. And so then this is where it gets really profound. So for 2 long hours, although they just seem to go by in a flash, we would stare at each other and we would be deeply in meditation without doing anything, and also without saying anything that wasn't related to something in that moment that it was occurring between us. So we didn't talk about what happened at other times, not even at another time when we were having sexual intimacy. We would purely stay in the present moment with each other. And then uh, when I looked on her face, I would see her archetypes. I would see maiden, lover, wife, whore, wisdom, witch, crone. And it was amazing. I just saw all of these in her faces, these archetypes. But perhaps even more amazing was the fact that when I looked at her, at certain times, I would see through the veil of her lives. And I would see her in different, I think you've had this experience, Todd, because you were kind of talking about it. But I would see her simultaneous incarnations. I mean, in the face, not so much in the story. But I would get an essence of who she was in another lifetime. And so, as far as movement goes, again, we were in a state of latihan. So, latihan, or this process doesn't say you can't move. I mean, in theory, you could even have normal sexual relations, but generally, we stayed very still, and that's why all of these different dimensions started to open up to us. And I want to say from the very beginning, and this is very important, that um, I call this experience the Golden Valley, and I've written about it quite a bit, so you can find it in my writings. But the Golden Valley, which I have 3 posts on, 3 parts, the Golden Valley involves this type of sexuality, but actually it doesn't replace our normal sexuality. In other words, if we're totally excited and want to have wild, passionate sex, by a river in the rainforest, that's completely one with this pure tantra or the Golden Valley. Tantra actually means weaving, warping, or looming of the two sides of our brain and our heart, but the brain we can see very clearly is split into two. And the eye is opened in the middle, the pineal gland, and the masculine is on the left, which is more related to thinking and language, and the feminine is on the right, which is more related to emotions and the psychic ability to receive messages. So that was the way it went. We had actually discovered this wonderful ambience in lovemaking between thinking and feeling. So, how are you going on that, Todd? I can't hear you.
I muted it. Do you think
Okay.
that these 12 that the original mother father produced, let's just say at the beginning of Earth, um,
Mm.
would you say 6 are feminine, 6 are masculine? Would you say that those might be like original archetypes?
Um, yeah, well, of course, I use the number four to explain the archetypes of soul family, but of course, four is a multiple of 12. So, it needs to be said again that whenever we talk about any system or levels or dimensions of consciousness, we're only we're only actually getting into the myth again, because in the end, there's only one. There's only and you and I, Todd, are one, and also we're both masculine and feminine. Because if we have, in which I feel is true, if we have 12 parallel lifetimes, then even for the feminist or the woman that feels that she's been with this deceitful man, a kind of um, patriarchy, expression of patriarchy, then well, she's both male and female in different lives.
Hmm.
So yeah, the 12 is the important number, and relates to many different systems of relationship, such as astrology and the I Ching and tarot cards, and all those. They're all 12 archetypes. So I call them maps of consciousness as well, because they're actually aspects of one consciousness.
Hmm. And like the potential of this, like one of the things that happened in that time that I was telling you about, one sequence started, and when it started, we were looking at each other, and in the silhouette of in the form of our body, from like the waist or the chest up, was all the cosmos. It was the universe. So then there was this information being exchanged where I'm looking at her, for instance, or vice versa, and I'm going into that portal or whatever it is and landing on a planet that she had an incarnation or that we had an incarnation. So it was like traveling through her and vice versa. I wonder if in the potential of these type of sacred encounters, if we can actually, let's just say, have more direct access through the mirror that we're merging with, more direct access to the Akashic record or to other possibilities. What do you think?
Um, Definitely. Um, so let's just look at the mind for a minute and how it operates. And so basically, matter is composed of energy, which is also light and sound. But the light comes in through our retina, and then it inverts, and it goes to the back of our eye, and then it travels through the brain, say to an area of the brain, and the brain works on probability. The mind works on probability. So basically, it, it sees it creates an external world based on what it's experienced in the past, and at the same time, as I said before, the mind is like it's two hemispheres, and the third eye or the pineal gland is right there, but it's in the middle of the brain. This is just where the energy comes, and the third eye. Again, it's kind of the receiver of information, and its signal goes to the rear of the brain, which is known, this is the cerebrum, and the rear of the brain, which is the oldest sort of reptilian part of the brain, is kind of back and down a bit, and it's called the cerebellum.
Mm-hmm.
And the cerebellum is basically the Akashic records, or the Barbara Marciniak called it the living libraries. And it's said that on a physical level, it exists under the Sphinx, which is the oldest stone monument on the planet. I think 130,000 years old. And of course, the pyramids are much later addition. Yeah, that's very true. Of course, we are the Akashic records. We are everything. So again, the idea of a library is just another.
Well,
Uh,
it seems like it would make sense if you could access, because let's just say everything external of me is the universe. So everything external of me is my whatever, my playground, my school. And if I can, it would only make sense that something that I am most resonant with, most aligned with, and most alike would give me a more direct access to, like if I just meditate and go into the Akashic. I'm not saying that's true, just would make sense. You mentioned, when you mentioned the cerebellum, you mentioned the reptilian part of the brain, and let's just put it on the table, reptilian consciousness or reptilian aspects in general, I know have created a lot of mixed feelings for people as the awakening has progressed. How would you look to, or how would you recommend to anyone who's maybe having a challenge in bringing to equilibrium, let's just say a reptilian consciousness or the thought of a reptilian? How would you suggest to someone to bring that into the 0 point field to neutralize the charge?
mm, um, yeah. Again, I'm very resonant with what you're asking. The reptilian part of the brain, people have certain fears around this because I don't know, maybe it's just that when they're children, they kind of scared of lizards and those kind of things, crocodiles, and in Australia you have to be pretty keen to know what's happening in a creek in northern Australia because you probably saw Crocodile Dundee, and he's down by the water with his girlfriend, and he's kind of being a bit smart ass, and all of a sudden this crocodile comes up and he goes, ooh.
Mm.
So anyway, let's have a look at this thing of again. It's to do with the ancient emotions. And let's look how we can clear those emotions. I did talk about how we can do it in intimacy, but how would we do it in our everyday life? Um, so almost all of the time, your emotions are triggered by someone else in your life. It could be a stranger. Definitely, you can have road rage or you know anything. Someone pinches your place in the queue and they don't queue up properly in the bank or whatever. But basically, uh, you get triggered, and so what is the best way to deal with this? So um, the first thing is that you need to you know, if someone makes you angry, for instance, we think of the rage from the original story. If someone makes you very angry, the tendency in people is to say, "Ah, oh, fucking hell, you're making me fucking angry," you know. Actually, no one's making you angry. It's just your anger that's coming to the surface, and you're not acknowledging that. You're projecting it onto the other. So when someone projects onto you like that, the most important thing is you leave. You don't try to work it out there and then. It's not the time. Maybe you could resolve it later with a lover, perhaps, or a friend. But you should leave. And when you leave, um, the best place to go is in nature, particularly around water and trees, or
Mm-hmm.
the ocean, or the rainforest, or whatever. Maybe in America you have spruce, or you have beautiful pine trees. Alaska. Um, so you get what I mean. So you go to a. So if you happen to live in a city and you can't go to places like that, or just lock your bedroom door and find some privacy, preferably where you can't be overheard if you can do that. Uh,
Enough
so
people think we're crazy.
they will. That's why you go to privacy, so you can actually you can vent. Okay. So the important key here is that you actually move the energy non-verbally. So no point in talking to yourself. You just you start, you scream, you cry, you shake. You know, you could if you're, if you're feeling blissed out, which is probably less usual. You could, go into bliss, and you could make sacred sounds or light language or whatever people make, and so you just continue until you feel integrated again, you feel grounded. It's really important as we become more evolved spiritually to stay grounded. I can remember a period in my life where I wasn't very grounded, and people would actually say to me, "Well, look, I understand what you're saying, but you don't seem to be grounded." And I had to learn it the hard way. Um, and as above, so below. Um, so, yeah, that's probably a
Do
bit on
you
there.
have you had? I mean, and I'm from the school of thought that we're everything. Some things, such as serpents or reptilians, or for me it was gargoyles when I was a kid, must have come in from our ancestral lineage memory, or otherwise it wouldn't be showing itself to the degree it does. But I'm from the school of thought that it's all me, and I know that's part of the journey for everybody is bringing everything into yourself. You know, one way or the other, it's coming by force or by flow, right? But have you what have been the biggest challenges for you to integrate and to bring equilibrium to? Has it been people? Has it been non-physical forces? Has it been events?
Um, hmm, I'd say, look, I don't really have any regrets about my life. I feel like I've been very blessed to have a very unusual and kind of, you know, varied life from one experience to another. Um, but I did have this kind of lingering sense of disappointment around women. Um, for instance, when I walked down the street in the town that I lived in for a long time, I'm fairly close to it still. Um, it was kind of like this. It's kind of like the spiritual kind of hippie capital of Australia, where there's lots of communities and people grow marijuana and
Mm-hmm.
all of that. They take various substances, particularly they go to drug parties and take ecstasy in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was walking down the main street of this small town, if a woman came towards me, we were coming towards each other, she would inevitably look. She'd either keep her eyes straight ahead or she'd look away. And a part of me got really kind of, what have we come to? What has humanity come to? What has this relationship between man and woman come to? And so I had this deep sense of regret that I'd never met a woman and where we'd been really in love at the same time, a kind of union, because life is about the right place at the right time. And for the right place at the right time to happen, it's fairly rare and you have to be really in touch with yourself. Because, of course, you can't love anyone else until you love yourself. That's a very simple thing that just about everyone understands, especially in the spiritual realm, anyway. So I was disappointed. And um, I mean, on the bigger level, on the macro level, I just felt this kind of sense of profound. I felt like a stranger in a strange land on in my earthly life, and I also felt I went through a terrible suicidal period in my life about 15 years ago, probably. And for actually 2 or 3 years, I was constantly thinking it wasn't worth being here. I think this is quite a common thing, this deep depression. It's a kind of, it has symptoms of bipolarism. And of course, that's to do with the brain again, imbalance. Um, and, people like Eckhart Tolle, various other people had a big battle with depression before they became enlightened. Um, so I think that's quite common. Um, yeah.
Do you think that the overall, the feminine and masculine energies are coming to a place of peace?
Mhm. Um, Look, when I talk about the future, the first thing I like to say is that because we have parallel timelines, you can't be sure that you and another person are going to end up in the same timeline. And therefore, it's a bit deceiving to talk with any certainty about anything that might happen in the future. But nevertheless, I am a time traveler, as we all are. So I've experienced Atlantis, which I think I talked to you about. And also, I've experienced the New Earth or Gaia, depending on what you call it.
What was that like?
And
What was the new Earth like?
okay, so what I saw was that we would go back to the first story I started this interview with,
Right.
and that women would no longer bleed in menstruation and childbirth, but they would give birth instantaneously on orgasm, and they would give birth to spirits, not physical babies anymore. And and another wonderful thing is that as the mind becomes balanced and works in coherence with the heart, then you develop your psychic abilities. It's really important that you have the heart like in balanced or actually in unity with the brain, the mind. It's really important because you can't be given the potential for psychic gifts until you've learned to use them compassionately or
Right.
lovingly. So, um,
Yeah, there's a
further,
responsibility I think that goes with that karma has a play in, just in case it's misused.
yeah.
Um,
So uh, uh, um, I'll just finish now, and then maybe
mhm.
we can have more of a conversation. But I another thing which I saw is that we're all going to return to youthful appearance and body, because we're going to become, of course, this whole frequency, the vibration of this new Earth is conducive to life force permeating the whole body. And we become basically, we're light beings, but we're still physical. We still have relationship with one another, because you can't evolve in this universe without relationship. And even the source or consciousness itself likes to evolve through form and formlessness.
Yeah.
And so
Even
basically, we're going to become creative beings. So we can instantaneously create what we desire. And eventually we are immortal. So we can leave the planet at will and return
At
to
will.
whatever planet we feel more comfortable with.
So I read this thing that Rumi wrote one time. It was a story. I didn't know he wrote stories, but he wrote stories, and it was talking about how when two people come together in intimacy, that they're creating, for all intents and purposes, they're creating babies. They're creating something or something somewhere across timelines and dimensions. Uh, but having said what you just said about we're reaching a point where we're going the woman on the initiated by orgasm is going to be creating an energetic baby. Do you think that it's something that we've always been doing, or and that now we're doing it consciously, or something that wasn't being done or wasn't being allowed until we hit a certain frequency on the earth?
I don't. When you say being allowed, there is no
Well, I
higher
mean,
energy.
like you said that we're reaching a place now where, because of the frequency that is available, that a woman upon orgasm in the right circumstances would be creating an energetic baby. So I was just wondering if we were doing it unconsciously before, or were we just not doing it at all?
Well, the interesting thing is, when I say that we're going back to create or co-creating between lovers a spirit baby, it might sound very divine, divine love. But of course, when the one split into him and her, and his rage and her terror, um, the children that resulted were the progeny of that union. And so, in a sense, again, you get this feeling that uh, consciousness creates universes for fun. It's one of my favorite expressions that I wrote.
Well, I
So
mean,
they go
yeah,
on.
I mean, based on what you said, we can all rest easy now because the source has imaginary friends as well as we do. We were told all our lives that they weren't real. Uh, God, I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you something in regard to our apparent on the cusp evolutionary surge that we're taking. Um, do you? Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. Just, no right or wrong answer. I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Do you think that Osho, Buddha, maybe even Amma or the Dalai Lama, do you think that they have contact with Star Family, like so many
Yeah,
people around the world?
yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't talk about anyone else's experience, but I would say that beings like that have a very strong connection. It's interesting that I've never been religious in the slightest, and I was lucky to grow up in a family where we never went to church. Uh, my family was typified by, well, we had fun when we had fun, a lot of fun. And my father was very good at telling rude stories who make us all laugh, Um, but uh, but basically, we are part of oneness. So consciousness is observing. I didn't mention when I mentioned consciousness that, again, I didn't repeat that we need to be observing our thoughts and feelings. And you can observe, when you observe them, you actually can be them because the subject and object, this and that, lover, loving, and loved have become one. So, uh, so when you have a deep experience in meditation where you reach a stage of thoughtlessness, until I met my friend Kevin, who I know that you've interviewed a couple of times,
Mm-hmm.
he he said, "Well, look, don't fall for the idea that that was an experience that I had in meditation that's separate from me. because you are that. You
Right.
are that.
Right.
And at the deepest level, there is no thought. Therefore, there's no relationship. Therefore, there's no experience and experiencer. There is no this and that and so forth.
You talk about the 12 and you're the 13th on of the time traveling team. That's your I know you're not stuck on labels and descriptions. I mean, I know this is the way you describe it. Sounds to me like your personal monad or your personal uh, yeah, your personal, let's just say, original archetypes or whatever that is a copy of what the original mother and father produced when they produced the 12. Uh, these these aspects, you're the 13th. Do they speak individually? Do they speak as a team? Do they offer any information like into the galactic realm or the other realms like elemental or angelic?
Mm. Well, that's an interesting question because, as you know, I'm not a great fan of a lot of things that happen on Facebook. I mean, there is a group of people, but they're in the minority really, who aren't distracted by information and different dimensions, the third, the fifth, and the 12th. You get the 12th if you're lucky. Um, and we have seven chakras, but actually we have 12 because there's five above and below us. And actually, I'm sure all of that is true, but it's kind of like we're starting to get complicated when we start to talk in terms of. So you could say I'm complicated talking about the 12 other time travelers, but the difference is, and it's kind of like a hairline, is that they're aspects of me. They're not.
Right.
I'm not channeling the dimension.
Right.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. Yeah. So let me ask you this. We'll just change directions a little bit. Just so people that come into these types of experiences might have heard this and gone, I'm not the only one. And so many people, as we've gone through things over the years, we're like, oh my God, I'm weird or I'm going crazy. But like in terms of time traveling, you mentioned Atlantis and such. Is it something that you've done a lot of? Is it something that you do like every month? I mean, or did you go through a period of time where you did a lot of it? And what were those experiences like? Would you say they were third eye, dimensional, all of the above?
Hmm. Well, it's interesting because I actually sent something in your messenger box, but this morning, before I woke up, I was having a very vivid dream, and I was on this property, and there was uh, a small nuclear explosion, and I sent a picture of it, and it set all of the people running for their lives across the land to get away from the radiation, and uh, at a certain point, um, a few survivors came together, and we were offered a brew which was made out of the nuclear fallout, and so we could either drink the brew or we could do nothing. And for me, the obvious thing was because I wanted to be away from the source of this radiation, wasn't to do nothing. But I found out later that most of the people had selected to take the brew, and it was kind of a homeopathic healing for the radiation. And just before I woke up, I was starting to feel the effects of the radiation, and I was kind of spinning
Right.
again. Spinning is always the. She was spinning, wasn't she, through the darkness, in terror. Um, so uh, when I talk about the 12 time travelers, um, they I think I actually talked to you about this before, Todd, but I have the feeling at the moment I'm holding Zoom groups, and I love that. I just love the ambience of coming together with no agenda other than being love. and not interrupting each other, basically remaining empty, which, see, the greatest gift that you and I are giving each other in this moment is listening, without, just listening in stillness
Right, right.
and focus. And the greatest gift you can give another, because then they get to, move everything that they need to move. And but just very briefly, I'm going to try and do this very quickly. In this community, there was a pyramid. Well, of course, I talked about the pyramid already in Osho's community, but also there's a sphere, and you'll probably remember this, that if I talk about the sphere, my glasses, where they are now, are kind of the equator of the sphere in the
Okay.
middle. Okay, and so this building, which we're going to construct, it's going to happen, is an Atlantean meeting place. And it's aspected, it has four doorways: north, south, east, and west, like that. Again, it's a bit like the soul family, the mother, father, son, and daughter. So each one of these four doorways has a certain elemental energy, and principally in this meeting that I'm about to describe, there'll be 6 men and 6 women, making 12, and the 13 is actually the center of the sphere, the mystery. And so they come in through these 4 doors, and they might choose one that sort of suits the ambience of a particular, or the purpose of a particular meeting that they're going to have. So you're walking through that door, and, well, first of all, around the inside wall, you can imagine now we're in a dome, and actually there's a plate glass floor, and underneath the floor is spring water, which has crystals and colored rocks lit up beautifully by lights under the water. And also the dome has a circular um, skylight, beautiful, quite a large one. So beautiful natural light is coming in from outside, and so you come in, and there's this kind of walkway around, and then that's about a meter wide. It kind of goes in meters. So then there's a desk, which is not a solid desk, but it's a strip, and that's a meter wide. And uh, we're not going to go beyond technology. Some people say, well, it's the age of technology, it's gone past. And actually, we're just going to produce more and more amazing technology. And, until we just directly are playing with energy, as in, the idea of free energy is not a new one. In fact, it was produced by Nikolai Tesla in the early part of the 20th century, until he was closed down by the banking corporations. Um, anyway, I'm diverging. So there's this round desk, maybe with some, amazing computers, quantum computers perhaps. And then there's a flap in the desk that opens. And so probably a woman would perform a brief ceremony where she would lift the flap, and she would walk across the glass floor. And in the middle of the floor, there's a metal grate. And the metal grate has 12 spokes. And right in the middle, there's another sphere, if you can picture that. Basically, the spokes lead out to the meeting attendees. So the middle of it is the spokesperson. Now, I've likened that to being the spokesperson for the 12, but there won't actually be a physical being in the center, because it is the mystery. It is that original energy manifest. It's like a time machine. Actually, I'm talking about a time machine that can travel through space as well, time and space. So she walks up to the grid, and she drops the crystal into the water below, and which imbues the atmosphere with her intention and energy for the meeting. And then she walks back, lifts the flap, and goes back to her seat. So that's a brief description of an atmosphere. They call it Atma, meaning in Sanskrit that means soul, as in Mahatma means great. It's a soul sphere,
Hmm.
a collective soul.
Man, very, very interesting and very informative. I appreciate you, man. Great way to end the Monday. 3 shows. This is a great way to end it. All right, man. I'm going to keep tabs on you, and I did read that you sent to me about the explosion and how the people took the drink, and the point of it being we don't. The way what I got from it was we don't have to relive that which we have already experienced. It's almost like, reading that story that you wrote. You can take it with you if you want to, but you don't have to. you know.
I'm glad you said that. I didn't actually say that, but yeah, that's the whole point of that little
Yeah,
dream, really. That,
yeah.
actually, originally I was taught that by my original spiritual teacher, and he said, "Well, look, you don't have to live through that, and actually, it can be instead of living through it in your awakened life, you can live through it in your dream life."
Yeah, right on.
Mm.
Right on. All right, man. Until the next time, I appreciate you, and best to you and all your loved ones over there. And when you got that trip coming up soon, right? When are you leaving? In July or something?
July, yeah, and I'm going to make sure I come and see you guys. I think,
That'll be cool.
um,
Just let me know what your
yeah,
schedule is. But I'm sure we'll talk before then. I'm sure
yeah,
we'll talk before
yeah.
then.
I'm happy to talk whenever you like to talk between now and then. That's still 7 weeks away, so
Right on.
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
brother. You take care.
Yeah, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity. It's
Nope.
wonderful for me to come here and speak with you, and pass my love to Morgan again too.
Will do. I will do that. And yeah, it's our pleasure. Really enjoyed it. You take care.